You've seen flyers and posts about it, and now you are curious. Yes, we're talking about the Google Summer of Code. GSoC is a global program that aims to increase the number of student developers involved in open source development by connecting them with the open source community. I'm sure you want to be a part of this prestigious event. Well, don't worry, we've got you covered. We're elated to present our speaker, Rohit Mazumder, a proud alumnus of Jadavpur University, Batch of Electrical Engineering 2021, who is a mentor at the Google Summer of Code on the Jenkins project. He is currently a software development engineer at Amazon. Brace in for this 1-hour, 30-minute seminar. And if you have any questions, add them in the chat box. He will get to it. And now I will request Rohita to proceed with the seminar.
Yeah, thanks, Moshana. Thanks for the introduction. Before I proceed, please, can someone confirm if you can hear me clearly?
Yes, we can.
Yes, you are clear.
Sure. Can you start my presentation? I actually don't have the right to present.
Yeah, I'm presenting it.
Sure, thanks. Cool. So guys, this is a session, and okay, so we already have a question. What is the main focus of today? So the focus of today is to give you everything which you need to know about GSoC on a very basic level. Like after this session, I hope that you guys will have an A to Z understanding of what this program is all about, as well as I'll leave you guys with some particular tips which you can use from a mentor's perspective. So as a mentor, I have worked through Google Summer of Code. I have worked through Google Summer of Code as well as a mentor, as well as a student. So I will give you some insights, like some tips about how you can go about maximizing your chance of getting selected. So that's kind of the main agenda for today. And as you guys already know from Moshana's introduction, so my name is Rohit, and I have been involved with open source for a long time. I have contributed to some of the famous organizations like Julia programming language, Jenkins, which is my primary organizations. There is another organization which is known as Continuous Delivery Foundation. I'm also the mentor at Continuous Delivery Foundation. And we have also worked with for a short time there in Google Assistant. So these are some of the places which I have worked in this domain. So what I have done for this session is that I have collected some of the common questions about Google Summer of Code, some of the questions which I get very frequently asked about, and I have arranged them in a presentation form. And I'm going to be answering those questions to you guys. And I'm going to be taking short intermittent breaks in between so that you guys can catch up and you guys can ask me any questions. And obviously I have reserved a particular section at the end of the presentation so that if I miss out any point, if there is anything else which you want me to focus on, you can ask me at that section. Okay, so with that, let's proceed to the first question. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Okay, so cool. So the first question is that what is open source and why should I give a damn? Okay, so we all know that open source has something to do with Google Summer of Code has something to do with open source. But before we move on to what exactly Google Summer of Code is, it's very important for us to understand what open source is all about. So the term open source means it's something which is available publicly and anyone can go out there and just inspect and modify or enhance something. So open source doesn't necessarily mean that you have to write code. So open source can be anything. It can be a design, it can be documentation. So there are a multitude of definitions behind open source. Like there are multiple things which are involved in open source. So one such thing is coding, which is something which deals with Google Summer of Code. But in general, open source means anything which is publicly available and you just can go and analyze and modify and study it. You can enhance it, like you can create another product from that open source. So that's what open source is all about. Now let's come to the next part of the question. Why should I give a damn? So the important thing is to understand, like, why should I even think about open source in the first place? So the short answer is that open source makes this world a better place. So to consider, let's imagine a world without open source. Let's say that you buy a computer, Now you want to browse the internet, so you have to pay for Mozilla Firefox. So it's not freely downloadable. You just have to pay for Mozilla Firefox. So let's say you pay for Mozilla Firefox and you want to download a file. So when you're going to download a file, you need something which is known as a download protocol and a download manager. So you have to pay for them too. Now let's suppose you have downloaded a song. Now you want to play that song. Now you have to pay for VLC media player too. So you can see how 90% of the tools which we are using in our regular day-to-day life, those are open source, those are free softwares which are making this world a better place. Like if they were something paid, it was something which we needed to pay for, then this technology would be unaffordable to common people. That's one of the reasons why we should all think about open source. The second reason is that open source is a hub for collaboration. Okay, it's a place where people from all over the world can come and collaborate on something. It may be a code, it may be a design, it may be a documentation, anything. So anyone can come out here and they can collaborate on this project. So this leads to much like good quality work, you know. So due to this immense collaboration which is happening worldwide on a worldwide scale, there is a good quality product which is at the end of that collaboration session. And that is why open source is so important to us. So now that we know what open source is, let's move on to the next question. So can we move on to the next slide, please? Good. So the next question which I get a lot is that why does Google give a damn? So, okay, I understand for a fact that we common people must care about open source, and we also we know that open source makes the world a better place and stuff. But Google as a billion-dollar company, Google has infinite wealth. Google can buy everything possible. Then why does Google give a damn about open source so much? Well, the reason behind this is that open source are one of the reasons why these companies are existing in the first place. Like many of the tools which Google uses, many of the like when you go and work for a company, you will realize that many of the libraries which they are using, even the programming languages like Python and JavaScript, these are just open source programming languages. Like anyone can go and check out how Python is working in the background. You can just go to GitHub and you can check out the Python repository. So because of these open source organizations, because of these open source products, these companies, not only Google, all these companies are thriving. So as soon as this open source thing disappears, this company is going to disappear. And that is one of the reasons why every company wants a good growth in open source space. Okay, every company wants to promote open source. Okay, and this is one of the reasons why Google creates this community known as Google Summer of Code. Okay, so this is one of the reasons why Google gives a damn so much about open source. Okay, let's move on to the next question now. Yeah, so now let's come to what is GSoC. So now we know what is Google, we know what is open source, we know why Google cares about it, we know why we should care about it. Now, what exactly is open source? What exactly is Google Summer of Code? So Google Summer of Code is this one program where Google, it's an initiative taken by Google, and Google wants more student developers, students who are in colleges. Google wants them to come out and do some open source work. They want student developers to be more involved in this community, which is basically, if you go into the open source community, you will find out that majority of the people who are present in the open source community, they are kind of experienced people, like they are maybe have 5, 6 years, 10 years, 15 years of experience in the company. So Google wants more students to come into this community. So this is one of the reasons why Google promotes Google Summer of Code. Now, to understand more about Google Summer of Code, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so to understand Google Summer of Code, what exactly happens in Google Summer of Code, you have to understand these few entities. There is a student entity, there is a mentors entity, there is an organization and org admins, and finally there is Google. So let's first talk about the organization and org admin. So what does it mean when I say that there are organizations in open source? Well, you can think of organizations like companies. Like in real world, we have companies like Amazon, Google, Microsoft. There are so many companies. In open source world, we don't call them companies. The reason why we don't call them companies is that they don't hire people. They don't have a profit. They don't have a business plan and everything. Okay, so they are just doing charity work. They are just creating software for free, software to be studied by others, and hence we use the term organization and not companies. So there are the most famous organizations which you've probably heard are Mozilla, and there is Sublime. I think some of you might have used this tool which is known as Sublime Text. So these are these organizations, and inside this organization there are these people who are known as org admins. So you can compare org admins to kind of like the CEOs and presidents and vice presidents of a company in real world. In the organizations in open source world, we call them as org admins. So these are the people. There can be the chairman, there are the vice chairman, there is an entire hierarchy which is present. So they have the final say in whatever happens in the organization. So like, for example, if they say that we don't want to participate in Google Summer of Code, then that's it. Then that organization is not going to be present in Google Summer of Code. So they are selected by a voting. Every few years there are votes taking place, and they are voted like this person is going to become the chairman, this person is going to become the vice chairman, and so on. Okay. So these are the org admins which are present in the organization. So the next group of people to talk about is the mentors. So as you guys already know, I am a mentor. So what does it mean to be a mentor in Google Summer of Code or mentor in an open source community? So mentors are these people who know the code bases. They are not org admins. So we don't have we don't have the final say in any decision with the organization text. But mentors are people who knows the code base of the organization. For example, Mozilla Firefox, like they don't know the entire code base. Like for example, Mozilla may have a code base of 10,000 lines. So we don't know about the 10,000 lines, but we probably know 2,000 lines, and we have the knowledge like, okay, if I need to develop a new feature, where will I put this code? If I need to develop a feature, where will I put that code? Where will I change this? Where will I change that? How will I build this? How will I resolve this issue? So we know a lot about the code base which is already present. And number two is that we are expert in some domains. Okay, so you'll find that there are some mentors who are expert in networking. They know everything about computer networking there are people who are expert in operating system. I personally specialize in a field which is known as distributed systems. Okay, so there is these mentors who know the code base of this organization, and they are expert in a particular domain. And then comes a group of people who are known as students. Now students basically refers to college students. So these are the people who applies to Google Summer of Code. So how the entire thing happens is that, so the students are going to tell Google, okay, now another thing you need to understand is that students have to apply to a particular project. So let's say that there is Mozilla Firefox organization, and Mozilla Firefox ke andar mein there are going to be several projects. Let's say there will be 10 projects, set of 10 projects which Mozilla Firefox wants to develop. So student will go to Google, and student will say, hey Google, I want to participate under Mozilla Firefox, and I want to do this project. So this is what an application of from the student to Google looks like. We are going to be talking about the application a little bit later in this session, but this is the whole gist of it. So the student goes and tells Google, hey, I want to participate in Mozilla Firefox under this project. So then Google is going to take all these applications from the students, and then when the application period is over, Google is going to take all this application and then forward them to the organization. And then we mentors and the org admins together, we will sit one day and we will read through the applications, and we will decide whether to select a student or not. So we go through the application, and if we feel that the student can be selected, then we send back the list to Google, hey, I want to select this student. And after some time, Google is going to announce this to the student, yes, you have been selected in Google Summer of Code. So this is the entire gist of, this is the entire flow of how things are happening. So Google is kind of the middleman. So students are applying through Google, and we are telling the result through Google. So we don't communicate directly with each other regarding the results and the applications and like the final applications and so on. So this is kind of the entire cycle of Google Summer of Code. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so this is the timeline. This is the timeline pertaining to this year. The timeline varies slightly from year to year. So this year GSoC was a 10-week program. It used to be a little bit more in the previous years, but this year it was a 10 weeks program. And this year you can see that on January 30, 2021, the organization applications opened. Okay, so this is another thing which you need to know, that in GSoC there are two applications. Okay, so first what happens is that first all these organizations which we were talking about, like Mozilla, Jenkins, CDF, whatever the organizations are, they first apply to Google. Now Google is going to select, so there are, let's say 2,000, 3,000 organizations which applies to Google, and Google is going to select the top 150, 200 organizations out of them. Okay, so till February 2021, organization application, it was the organization application deadline. So people were organizations were applying. And then on March 10, 2021, the organizations were announced. So Google announced, okay, hey, I have selected Mozilla, I have selected this. These are the organizations we have selected for this year's Google Summer of Code. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Yeah, so the next thing which happens is that the student application period begins. So now that the list of organization is out, now the students start applying. So the student will write their application and it will send it to Google, and as I said, the Google will take those application and it will forward us those application, and the application review period begins. So we will start reviewing this application and we will send back the results to Google, and Google is going to announce them to the world that these students have been assigned to these projects and they have been selected to for Google Summer of Code. So that is the first part. So now after you get selected to Google Summer of Code, what happens is there is a phase which is known as the community bonding phase. So it's a 1 month program where we mentors and the students as well as the org admins, they try to bond with each other. So we try to know a little bit about each other, not on a very deep personal level, but on a skill wise level, on various factors. We just try to bond with each other. We don't do any coding work. We discuss on the project what are the challenges which we feel are going to be there in the project. We do some development, we do some minor POC work. There is no hardcore coding involved in this period. And then after 1 month, and this period is actually very important, like many people take this period lightly, but if we feel like that we are not bonding enough with our students, then we have to, then we just go back to Google and tell that, okay, hey, I couldn't bond with this student. I feel like the student is not appropriate for Google Summer of Code. And then Google is going to reject that student right away. So this period, although we are not doing any coding, this period is also important. So the next period is the coding period. This is where the students start coding. They do the hard code coding. And after 1 month, what happens is that there is a mentor evaluation. So the mentors, we start to evaluate the students' work. So whatever they have done in that first 1 month, we do an evaluation. And if we feel that the students' work is satisfactory, then we send Google a notification ki, hey, we like what the student is doing. So you can like, I want this student to pass the evaluation. And once the student passes the evaluation, Google is going to give a stipend to the student. And then the student is going to start coding again. And then there is going to be another evaluation. So there are multiple evaluations in the between, in the entire period. And each time you pass the evaluation, Google pays you some amount of money. So this is how the entire process happens. And if you pass the final evaluation, then Google will give you the certificate that you have successfully completed Google Summer of Code. So this is kind of the entire flow behind Google Summer of Code. So I will be taking a small pause here. Just let me know, guys, if you guys have any questions so far, and if you have been able to follow the entire flow behind Google Summer of Code.
If anyone has any question, can add them in the chat box. We will take up.
Yeah.
So I don't think there is any question for now. Dada, you can continue now.
Okay, Aniket is asking roadmap to crack GSoC for fresher.
Okay, we have got a question.
Sure, we will cover that later on, a little bit later in this session. Okay, so since there are no other question, we can proceed. Yeah, just move on to the next slide. Yeah. So now that you know that what Google Summer of Code is all about, so the next obvious question is, what's in it for me? Like, if I do this, what do I get exactly? So there are quite a number of things which you are going to get if you crack Google Summer of Code. So let's move on to the next slide and reveal the list of perks. Yeah, so here are a list of direct and indirect perks which you get if you crack Google Summer of Code. So number one is a hefty stipend, which is nearly about 1.2 lakhs. So this stipend used to be actually much larger. I think last year it was nearly 2.3 lakhs, and before 2017 it was as large as 3 lakhs rupees, but it is now 1.2 lakh, and this is decided by something which is known as PPP, purchasing power parity. I'm not going to go into very detail of what PPP is all about. You are free to Google about it. So it's an economic concept in which like you're paid as per the economic condition of your country basically. So what happens is that, let's say that you are here in India and you get paid 1 lakh rupees. So 1 lakh rupees is a huge amount for you, but if you are in United States, 1 lakh rupee will be nothing to you. Like so a person in United States gets paid a much higher value, something like 5 lakh or something like that. So this is decided on a various factor, and the stipend decided for this year was comparatively less, but still a lot of money, which is 1.2 lakhs. So the second important perk which you get when you work at Google Summer of Code is a referral to apply for a job at Google. So what happens is that once you complete this entire Google Summer of Code, like if you can complete the entire, like if you don't fail any of the evaluations, then they will give you a direct referral, and you can take that referral and you can sit for a Google interview. Next thing which you get, and this is kind of not a constant thing, like this depends from organization to organization, but almost all organization does this. They give you a personal LOR. So basically the chairman of the organization is going to write you a letter of recommendation ki, okay, I have worked with this person and I know that this person is extremely qualified, this person has this one so skills, and you can take that digital LOR and you can attach it to your resume. It is going to give a boost to your resume. So that is another indirect perk, you can say. Another indirect perk which you can get is that invitation to top-notch open source conventions worldwide. So once you crack Google Summer of Code, there are going to be these amazing open source conventions, like to name a few. Like if you are participating in Python, then you'll get invitations to some big conventions like PyCon and so on. So these conventions are firstly extremely expensive. They have extremely expensive tickets, so you'll get this for free, and they can even invite you to be a keynote speaker there. So you can go out there and you can discuss your work with some very amazing, or in front of a very amazing audience. So that is another indirect perk which is there associated with Google Summer of Code. And this is one of my favorite perks, that is you get to meet and you get to talk with amazing people. You can have a network of amazing people at such a young age. Like for example, I remember when I first started working for GSoC, I met a guy named Jeff, and this guy worked at Microsoft for around 24 years, and he was one of the principal developers behind GoDaddy.com. And I'm still in contact with him, and I asked, was some time or the other, I asked him for career advices, financial advices, and whatnot. So you can meet these amazing people, you can be friends with them for life. So that's an amazing part which you get when you crack Google Summer of Code. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide now. So the next question is that, can I participate? So everything is looking amazing so far, but can I participate? So this is another question which I get very often. And I know what is the sentiment behind this question. The sentiment behind this question is that in today's world, job interviews are not that fair. Like there are a bunch of discrimination which happens in a job interview. The discriminations can be on basis of your college. Like I hear this a lot. Every time I open a LinkedIn, I see someone or the other asking this question: can a Tier 3 college, can a non-IIT student get this, get that? And so yeah, it's in today's world, it is true. Like there are a lot of discrimination which goes by college, by your college, by college tier, by your college accreditation, by the course you are studying. Like and one of the big thing which I see is that non-engineer students cannot participate in, cannot sit for those interviews. So there are a lot of discriminations which happen in job interviews, but thankfully this is one of those places where there is no discrimination at all. Everyone can participate, and I have seen people participating from non-engineering, non-science background, non-computer science background. Even art student can participate. I think last year I saw a girl. She was from a psychology college. She knew a little bit of coding, and there was this organization which was specializing in the psychological things. So they basically selected that girl, and she had a very little knowledge of coding, but she had a very good background in psychology, and she got selected. So this is one of those places everyone can participate, BSc student, art student, and everyone. So it's a free space. So this is one of the amazing things about Google Summer of Code. Okay, so let's go to the next question now. Okay, so these are some of the stats for 2021. So so as I said, there were 199 organizations that were accepted this year out of, I think, 2,000 organizations applied, and I think close to 200 organizations were accepted by Google. And a total of 1292, so nearly 1.3K students were selected this year globally. So this number has considerably increased. I think the number last year was 1.1K, and the number this year is close to 1.3K. And so the number has considerably increased. And these students belong to 70 different countries and 613 different colleges across the world. And this is something to be proud of. Like when I see the start, it feels like it's very difficult. Like 1.3K students across the world it's a very less number. It feels like it's a very less number. But the amazing thing is that India has always been being one of the top participants in Google Summer of Code. And I always see that 70% of the selections in Google Summer of Code are right from India. The top 12 colleges, if you just arrange all those colleges by the selection number, you'll see that the top 12 colleges are all from India. You can just move on to the next slide. Yeah, so you can see that the top 12 colleges are all from India, and with the highest being from IIT Roorkee and IIT Varanasi. Okay, so with a little bit of effort, we can easily be among this list, guys. I'm talking about Jadavpur University. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Okay, so now comes the main question: what does a GSoC application looks like? No, so everything is good so far. So now, like we know, for a job interview, there are interviews, there are exams, various online exams and resume screening and whatnot. But what exactly happens in Google Summer of Code? So you know the entire flow, but what does an application actually look like? So in Google Summer of Code, the application basically is known as the proposal document. Okay, so this is a document which you are going to send to Google, and then Google is going to forward to us. And this document should contain everything you want to say to us. Okay, it should contain everything you want to convey. You want to make your case for us that yes, select me for this. Okay, so that is known as the proposal document. So here are some of the things which are present in the proposal document. So if we can shift over to the next slide. Yeah, so the proposal document. So the proposal document contains some of these stuff. So the first thing is name and contact information. By name, I mean your name, and by contact information, I don't mean your address of your homes. I see some people putting their home addresses. It simply means that you can put your email address, you can put your LinkedIn ID, maybe you can put your GitHub ID and stuff like that. The second thing is abstract of the project. So the project for which you're applying, you need to write a small abstract, like a small summary of the entire project. And this is one. The next thing is, why is this project necessary? So we are going to be funding this project. Google is going to be, not we, the Google is going to fund your entire project. So they are going to pay you a hefty stipend, plus they are going to pay the organization. So they pay us so that we can create the entire infrastructure for you. So like for example, let's say that for your project, you need to borrow maybe you need to have an AWS account. Let's say now AWS account is extremely costly and you don't have to bear the cost. So Google is going to fund that too. So why is Google going to fund your entire project? So here you need to write something. Why do you feel this project is going to benefit the people, benefit local people, benefit common people, benefit the community in general? So you need to write out here, why is this project necessary? Why do you feel this project is necessary? Next part is known as the details about the project. Here you just write a little bit about your project, like what is going to do, what is not going to do, and stuff like that. The next thing, and I have made this a bold because this is a very important, deliverables breakdown. Okay. So basically, this is probably the most important section of your proposal, and I cannot stress this enough how important this is. So what deliverables breakdown means is that you have a project and you have to basically provide a timeline in your document. So this proposal document is usually 15 to 20 pages long, and this deliverables breakdown is of at least 7 to 8 pages long. I see people writing 7 to 8 pages long, but it can be something like 3 to 4 pages. So what happens in deliverables breakdown is that you take up your project and you break it down into small subtasks, and then you assign these subtasks to particular weeks. So let's say that this is a 10-week program. So in deliverables breakdown, what you have to do is that you have to write week 1 may I'll do this much, week 2 may I'll do this much. You have to write this, and this is something which is very important. And the reason why this is very important is that we mentors, when we read your proposal, the only way we can know that you have skill is by reading this. We are not taking any interviews, we are not screening your resume or anything. So the only way for us to know that you actually have the skills to do this project is by looking at your deliverables breakdown. Because a person who doesn't know anything about the subject cannot write in detail, give a detailed timeline about a project. Only if you know about a particular subject, only if you have the particular skills, then only can you write a deliverables breakdown. Okay. So that is an important thing. to keep in mind that you should focus about your deliverables breakdown. And the last section is about you. You can write a little bit about you. Okay. So now another thing to note, guys, is that some organizations have their own set of rules pertaining to writing a proposal. So I see a lot of organizations nowadays, they directly provide you with a template and they ask their students just fill up this template. So this is something which I have shown you, this is how we can arrange, but don't follow this if you have a template. If the organization is providing a template, if the organization is providing a template, make sure to follow those and don't use your own template. Don't try to be creative around this. Okay, just simply use their templates, simply follow the rules which they are pertaining. And if they don't give any rule, then you can just arrange stuff like I have said, like first your name, contact, then your abstract, then why this and that. You can just follow these points. Okay, so that's about the proposal and writing the proposal. So let's move on to the next question. Okay, so now let's talk about what do we mentors look for in a student. So how do we maximize my chance? How do I maximize my chance of getting selected? Okay, this is another important question which I get a lot. So everyone is applying, so many students are applying. I know that for every project out there, there are 100 and 150 students apply, and for each project only one student is going to be selected. So what do we mentors exactly look for in a student? What makes an application stand out from the rest? What makes a student stand out from the crowd? How do we select a student? So this is something which I'm going to be discussing about right now. Let's move on to the next slide. Yeah, so these are some of the tips for from a mentor at Google Summer of Code. So number one is reach out early. So this is very important. So as you saw, as you have seen, the Google process begins around January 30. You know, you have seen that the Google process begins around January 30, and the organizations are announced around like close to March. And 50% of those students who are selected in the Google Summer of Code, they reach out to us very early. They reach out to us as early as maybe the 3rd week of December or the 2nd week of December. They start reaching out to us and they talk to us, hey, I want to participate in your organization if your organization gets selected and stuff like that. So they start to reach out to us very early. So try to reach out to the organizations early. So here is another important side question which you may think, how do I know which organizations are going to be selected for Google Summer of Code? Like, how do I reach out to an organization even before Google Summer of Code announces, hey, these are the list of the organizations selected? So one important rule of thumb is that 90% of the organizations in a particular year are repeated next year. So if you are going to be applying for Google Summer of Code in 2022, you can just simply take a look at the list of 2021 and you can select some of the organizations from there. Like 90% of those organizations are going to be repeated. This happens every year. Maybe 10% change rehta hai, but the rest are all same. Okay, so this is how you can reach out early. Just select a few organizations from those lists and you can reach out to them. The next important thing is communicate freely. So communication, guys, is a very important factor in Google Summer of Code. As I have said once before, what happens is that in Google Summer of Code, as I said, the open source community hai, and open source community means there is a lot of collaboration which happens. And because of these collaborations, we always need to have a student with us who can communicate freely with us. If you have difficulties communicating with new people, then I would suggest before applying to Google Summer of Code, just work on your communication skills, because communication is going to be very important. So when you reach out early to us, we are going to be checking out, okay, is this student communicating with us properly? Is this student is there with us in the meetings, talking with us in the meetings and stuff like that. The next important thing, and this is the best bait, is that make 2 to 3 contributions to the organization before applying to Google Summer of Code. Okay, so let's say you want to apply to Mozilla Firefox, and you know that Mozilla Firefox has been selected. The next step for you is the first step is reach out early and communicate freely. The next step for you is to make some small contributions. Some small contributions can be like a small bug fix, some small patchwork. It may be 2 to 3 lines of code, or it may be even no line of code. Like as I said, Google Summer of Code is not just about like open source is not just about coding. It can be documentation work. Make 2 to 3 small contributions, so that when we select your application, we can say that, hey, I know that this student has made 2 to 3 contributions to our organization. This student probably knows the code base better than the other students. So this is one of the best things which you can do. Reach out early. After reaching out early, you can make 2 to 3 contributions to the organization. Next thing is that create a draft proposal and get it reviewed by the mentors before final submission. So as I said, you don't submit the final, you have the final proposal, you don't submit it directly to the organization. Google is always the middleman. You submit it to Google and Google then forwards the application to us. So what does some student do is that they take the organization, they write their own proposal and they just directly submit it to Google. A better way would be you write a draft proposal and you reach out to some of the mentors in this organization. You tell the mentor, hey, I have written up a draft proposal. Can you just review my draft proposal and give me some comments on it and some reviews, some feedbacks on it? And then you try and incorporate those feedbacks. It's not you may not receive feedbacks actually. Like mentors are usually busy, like preparing themselves, preparing the environment for Google Summer of Code, as well as most mentors have daytime jobs, just like me. I work at Amazon. We have daytime jobs, so we may not have the time to review your proposal. But if you can get a review from them, it's very good, because you will get to know where the mistakes are in your proposal, and you can just correct them, and then you can do the final submission. Okay. And once again, I want to focus on this, guys. Write a very realistic timeline. So this is one of the things which I have seen. Deliverables breakdown is very important. And what does some student do is that they write unbelievable expectations. Like they say that in 1 week, I'm going to be doing this much. They give up really hyper contributions, like so and so many things I want to do. And we know that instantly, like, this is not realistic. Even if the student is highly qualified, this is an unrealistic timeline. So we directly reject applications then and there itself. So what you need to do is that you need to provide a very realistic deliverables breakdown. Okay. And finally, this is also very important. We are looking for students who are passionate about open source and are going to stick around even after Google Summer of Code ends. Okay. So we know that some students are here only for the fame. So they just want to crack Google Summer of Code. They want to get a referral at Google, or maybe for the money. So we are actually not going to look for students like that. If we get a feeling that, okay, this student is only here just for Google Summer of Code, then we are probably going to reject that student. So we want students who are passionate about open source and going to stick with us even after Google Summer of Code ends. It's like Google Summer of Code, you have to work like 40 hours a week. So we are not expecting you कि Google Summer of Code end होने के बाद भी you will work 40 hours, but we expect you कि okay, maybe month में अगर if there are 2 meetings, you are going to be present in their 2 meetings. You are going to voice your opinion and stuff like that. So we are passionate about having people who are going to stick with us. Okay, so that's a very important tip from me. So let's move on to the next question. Okay, so this is a very famous question which I get, how to prepare myself for Google Summer of Code. So this is a very difficult question, and I'll say why it's difficult, because unlike other things, Google Summer of Code doesn't have a fixed syllabus. It's not like something you can study and you can just appear for an exam. Even for interviews, you can study common question, you can study, you can prepare for data structures and algorithms. But Google Summer of Code, there is no such syllabus involved, and each project and each organization is different. Obviously, if you work in Mozilla Firefox, that's not going to make you a expert if you start working in Linux. Okay, so you may be knowing how a browser works, but it will take some time to understand an operating system wala code. Okay, so for every organization, the code base is different, the language may be different, the tools which they're using is different. So preparing for GSoC is a bit tough than preparing for any other exams, I would say. So one thing which I would like to point out is the first step would be always to learn Git and GitHub. So without those things, you cannot really succeed. So first and foremost, learn Git and GitHub to the core and try to make some contributions. So go out to GitHub, go out to GitLab and all those places where you find code repositories. Try to make some contributions. If you have no experience with Git and GitHub before, one thing which I can recommend, guys, is that you can participate in Hacktoberfest. I think the Hacktoberfest has started already, I'm not sure. So Hacktoberfest is this amazing place. Like it's for open source, but it's an open source contribution program, but it's meant for beginners. Like beginners, matlab, it's complete beginner level. Like you have to just make 2 pull requests. I think 2 to 3 pull requests. I'm not sure about the exact number. So if you have learned Git and GitHub and you want to apply them for practice, Hacktoberfest is a great place to practice your Git and GitHub skills. So once you practice for that, the next step would be obviously to gain knowledge in a particular subject and gain knowledge in a particular language. Okay, so for language, you can choose any of the languages. I think there are tons of language, like there are projects in every language. There are projects in C++, there are projects in C, Java, Ruby, Python, JavaScript. There is projects in every languages in Google Summer of Code. So language is not really a question like what language should I learn. But yeah, some languages have more projects than the other languages. Some languages, like if you know Java, like I think Java has very good number of projects. Same goes for JavaScript. I think JavaScript has a high number of projects. You can find these stats online pretty easily, like what percentage of GitHub has Java code, what percentage of GitHub has JavaScript code and stuff like that. So, but the next important question is that you need to understand that particular language to the code. Like you need to know as much as possible about that language, because the code in a Google Summer of Code or the code which you write in Google in an open source organization, that is not going to be a normal college level code. Okay, that is going to be a production level code. So it will have a lot of exception handling. It will be resilient to a lot of difficult things. So it will be taking some time for you to understand, but it's going to be worth it. Okay, that's the second thing. And gain knowledge in a particular subject as well. Okay, just gaining knowledge in a particular language is not going to cut it, guys. So you have to gain knowledge in a particular subject. So maybe, for example, you can gain knowledge in image processing. I'm just taking one example. Let's say you have learned a lot about image processing, then you look for organizations which work with image processing. One famous organization which work with image processing is MATLAB. And I think the code for MATLAB is written in C++. So now you have the two objectives. So I need to learn C++, I need to learn the image processing subject very nicely, and then I can go and do my contribution. So this is how Google Summer of Code actually works. So you don't have a syllabus, you have to pick your subject yourself. What particular topic do I want to master, and master that topic and go out there. Okay, so one of the topics which I mastered when I was preparing myself for Google Summer of Code was operating system, and then I applied to Jenkins, and then basically I saw that it has similarities with Google So basically I didn't prepare for Jenkins as such. I prepared as for like I was normally preparing for operating systems, and then I found out that Jenkins are using some of the concepts in operating system, and then I realized that Jenkins is using this wider known concept which is known as distributed system. It's kind of a difficult concept, but I paced myself and I learned about it, and then I already knew Java, so I was able to apply for Jenkins in general. So that's how you prepare yourself for Google Summer of Code. So there is not a definite roadmap. Sorry to disappoint you guys, but this is how it works. You first learn Git and GitHub, then you prepare a language, then you prepare a subject, and then you go and apply. So that's it. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Okay, so this is another question. Does Google help me get a job? So the answer is going to be mostly no. Okay, so Google Summer of Code actually doesn't help a lot in getting a job, but it does help to some extent. I'll explain how. Firstly, you guys are mostly college freshers, like you guys going to graduate and get into your first job. So the interview for freshers in our country, not just in our country, in the worldwide, is focused on data structures and algorithms. They don't focus a lot on development skills. They don't focus a lot on open source. And this is there is a particular reason behind that. The reason is that development skills and all of these subjects, they are not that easy to master. As I was saying, Google Summer of Code में कोई definite syllabus नहीं होता है. So it's the same concept, same, you can extrapolate the same concept. It's not like if someone comes and asks you, hey, can you design this particular web browser, you will be able to design. So there is nothing to study like that. Okay, so that is one of the reasons why freshers are usually asked data structure and algorithm questions in interviews. They don't usually go to development stuffs. Like some companies may ask you a little bit about development stuffs, but it's mostly 90% of your interview is going to be focused on data structures and algorithms. So in that way, from a development perspective, GSoC doesn't help you get a job. The second thing is that although GSoC doesn't help you get a job, but GSoC is going to boost your resume, give your resume an extremely good boost. Like for example, if you consider off-campus placements, let's say if you're applying for a job in, let's say, Amazon, then Amazon may, whenever there is a new position opens up, I think like around 30 to 35,000 people apply for that position. Now, to make your resume stand out, if you have Google Summer of Code, a program which is so lucrative, it's going to make your resume stand out, and you're most probably going to get selected for, your resume is most probably going to get screened out of those 35,000 resumes. So that is one of the second things. And third thing is that, as I said before, Google Summer of Code, if you crack Google Summer of Code completely, you will get a referral at Google. So yes, you can directly apply for a job at Google, but even after you can apply for a job, like you can directly sit for the interview, but even after you sit for the interview, the questions are not going to be based out of your GSoC project. It's going to be based out of data structure and algorithm. But that being said, some companies are there, some companies, specifically some startups are there which are nowadays focusing a lot on development skills. Like, since those are startups, they don't really look after data structures and algorithms. They are looking for the students who knows a lot of development skills, has a hands-on development skills. So cracking GSoC is going to definitely help you crack those kind of interviews. And there are some companies like Red Hat who promotes open source so much that they will probably hire you in a jiffy if you can crack Google Summer of Code. So this is the full answer behind, does Google Summer of Code help me get a job? Okay, so let's move on to the next question now. So does Google Summer of Code help me perform better as a developer later in my life? Okay, this question is a very interesting question, and yes, Google Summer of Code definitely helps you perform better as a developer. If you crack Google Summer of Code, you will find that when you go to your full-time job after graduation, if you take some job, you'll find that you are at a much better position than the rest of the people who have taken that job. I can speak from my own experience. Like, for example, you can see that many people out there are doing this full stack courses, dev courses, development courses on Udemy, on YouTube and stuff. But GSoC is very different from those courses, and I'll tell you why. Because those courses basically focuses on a particular language, a particular stack. Like, some course may teach you the Mon stack, MongoDB, Express, React, Node, and so on. So you are learning those stack and you are learning to build your application, but you are not learning the entire development cycle. So in a development, if you go and take a job as a developer, if you take a job as a software engineer or software developer, it's not that you're just going to write code. Writing code is going to be a small fraction of your life. Okay, other than writing code, you'll also have to test your code. You have to perform tons of testing, unit testing, intake testing, load testing, and whatnot. And then you have to do the maintenance of the code. You have to understand how the code goes into production. You have to understand how a server is reacting with your code, how the customer is getting satisfied, how metrics which are being collected for your code, for understanding what the customer wants. So all of these are involved in a real life developer job. While in a particular course, they may only teach you what Mon stack is all about. But if you participate in GSoC, you will be able to see the entire development cycle at such a young age. So when you go to a developer job later in your life, you're obviously going to perform better than the rest of the people. So I think that's the last question. And let's move on to the next slide now. Yeah, so now it's the time for your questions. Let's see if you have any questions. Okay, so
a few questions came in the chat box earlier.
Yeah, take a look at this. Okay, so Aniket is asking roadmap to crack GSoC for fresher engineering. We have already covered that. Arindam is asking, starting out, a student might not have much familiarity with the particular code base. Also, most of the text would be unknown. So how would the application has to be made stand out? Yes, Rhythm, this is an excellent question, and we have discussed about this, but I would like to point this out again. So firstly, reach out early. So if you reach out early, you will start like when you reach out, you're not going to be like, hey, I want to participate in Google Summer of Code. You're going to be much like, hey, I am this person from this college, and I'm interested in contributing to your organization. And so they are going to point you, okay, you can go ahead and solve this bug. They'll point you to a very simple bug, or you can directly ask them, do you have a bug for beginners to solve? Do you have some work which which a person who doesn't know any knowledge about can look into the bug and understand the code base a little bit more? So this is something which you can ask a mentor or ask an organization admin when you reach out to them. So once they assign you with a simple bug or simple fix, you will, through that bug or through that fix, you can basically explore the code base and you can learn about the code base. So unless you have a little bit of knowledge, you at least need some 1% knowledge to write your proposal. Otherwise, you won't be able to write the proposal. So this is one of the benefits of reaching out early. Okay, and the second question is it necessary to start to contribute in that particular organization even before selected? Yeah, Arindam, for around 50% of the organization, the rule is that there is no definite rule. You have to contribute before getting selected. But obviously, if you start contributing, then your resume is not your resume. Your proposal is going to stand out because you can directly write in your proposal. The reason you can select me is that I have already worked in the union organization. I have done these contributions. You can give the link of your contributions and stuff like that. But yes, once again, I think there are certain organizations there is a compulsory rule that you have to make this many number of contributions, otherwise your application is going to be straightforward rejected. I think one of those organizations is Checkstyle. They have a fixed rule. You have to make 3 to 4 contributions at least, otherwise your proposal is going to be straightforward rejected. But those organizations are very less in number. Majority of the organization doesn't require you to contribute from beforehand. Yeah, so Sainika, can you share programming language necessary for the projects, and please share some domains regarding? For programming languages, I would say, as I said, there are no particular programming languages. So which you can just start with any programming language, but some programming language there are much larger number of projects. So if you are a complete beginner into development, I would advise to stick with those programming language unless you know nothing about that programming language and you have very less time in your hand. So it's like if GSoC is beginning in 1 month, and if I'm planning to start with a new programming language for 1 month, that's not going to be worth it, because 1 month you have a lot of work, like going through the code, going through the project, writing your proposal and everything. So that's not going to cut it. Okay, so it's better to stick with the language which you already know. But if you have sufficient time, like if you have 4 months time in your hand, and then you can just go out and research, okay, Java there are much more projects than Python, let me run Java for a while. Okay, so that's something which you can do. But once again, if you have a language which you are very comfortable with, you will surely find project in that language in Google Summer of Code. Or this is which skills are necessary for Google Summer of Code. So basically there is only one skill which is necessary, which is Git and GitHub. The rest of the skills, those are dependent on the organization. The organization, if it's a web browser organization, then you need to know about networking. If it's a mathematical organizations like MATLAB, then you need to know about image processing, AI and stuff. If it is an organization like me, I belong to something which is known as Continuous Delivery Foundation, then you need to have a knowledge about cloud native tools and clouds like Azure, AWS and stuff like that, and maybe a little bit knowledge about operating system and distributed system. So it depends from organization to organization. So first step would be go out there and check out what are the organizations there. So have some options, just check out the list of the organizations. It's very easy to find the list. You can just go to Google Summer of Code's website. You will find the entire list from previous years. So you'll have a knowledge of what are the organizations which are coming to us. Okay, Bikram is asking, is there some mechanical related projects where a mechanical student gets preference? Yes. As far as I remember, I saw even a mechanical organization, not mechanical in general, but I think it had something to do with CERN. I think, I don't remember. It had something to do with physics, and they required some mathematical precision calculation regarding tensor buildings and stuff like that, where they were looking for some mechanical, like you needed some knowledge of mechanical engineering. That's what I'm trying to say. But I don't remember the name of the organization. But like specific, like non-core subject wala organization, there are less in number. There are obviously there are even organizations which specializes in pharmacy, like drug building and stuff like that. But obviously you need to know how to code properly, because it's not just going to be drug building. It's not just going to be chemistry for you. It's not just going to be calculating on a piece of paper. It's going to be writing code to calculate. Okay. So yeah, there are obviously projects regarding mechanical, pharmacy, psychology and everything, even designing also. But coding is once constant. Any other question?
A question came in the form earlier. How to get familiarized with the code base of an organization in which I'm planning to contribute? Okay, sure. So this is a good question. So one important way, this is my personal opinion only now, this is not a general rule. So what I personally do is that I start with a small bug. Okay, so maybe you can just go to the issues section. If you go to GitHub, you will see that there is a tab known as issues. You can click on the tab and you will find all the bugs listed out there. And sometimes in some organizations, mostly in those organizations which are participating in Google Summer of Code, Hacktoberfest and stuff like that, you'll find that there are tags given to each of the bugs. Tags like low hanging fruit, easy, for beginners, first time grabbers. These are some of the tags which lets you know, okay, this is a bug which a beginner can solve. And the reason why we place the tags is obviously so that beginners can come and solve them. And obviously, and the second reason is that
we mentors are basically busy and we don't have time to solve small bugs. So we feel that if a beginner comes, let that person solve the bug. And that is why we put the tags out there. So one of the important things you can do is that you can go and grab one of those issues and you can start solving those issues. And through those issues, you can familiarize with yourself with the code base. That is one way. And the second way which I do is that try to build the code. Whenever you go to an organization, let's say you go to the code base of Mozilla, you will see 10,000 lines of code. Now, how does that 10,000 line of code become a code browser, become a web browser on your computer? So they are building it. They are converting that code into a piece of software. Now, how they are doing this? You just check out the developer, check out the process in which the entire deployment happens. Okay. So they will have some README file. README file, you'll find some pointers like how to convert the piece of code into the software piece. So what you can do is that you can basically follow those steps, and through those steps, you can explore the code base. So those are the 2 pointers which I can provide you with.
Okay, we have like 2 more questions.
Sure.
One is open source a necessity for product-based companies?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Is open source a necessity for product-based companies?
Okay, yeah, sure. I think I have already covered this. It's like in that, does GSoC help me get a job? So no, it is not. It's absolutely not. Like for startups, it may give you a small age, but as I said, your interviews are going to be based out of DSA. So GSoC has nothing to do with them. And yes, as I said, key interviews, what happens in freshers interviews is that 90% of the weightage is in DSA and 10% of the weightage is in projects which you're building in your college life. So if you have cracked GSoC, then you have an amazing project. So you don't have to worry about the project. So the 10% is given to you. You just have to focus on the 90%. So that is one advantage which you get from your fellow friends and fellow students of your batch. But other than that, it doesn't help you get a job, and it is obviously not necessary to get a job. Okay, so like as I said, as you have seen the number, only 1.3 thousand people all across the world cracks Google Summer of Code in a particular year, and it's not like only 1.3K student gets job. Everyone gets job at the end. Okay, so it's not necessary. Okay, we have a question in the comment section, I think. Yeah, Arithro is asking, when you said you can contact companies asking them for opportunities to help, did you mean we should have contacted them personally or directly work on their code base on GitHub? Yeah. So Arithro, so firstly, it's not our companies. As I said, we refer to them as organizations. And secondly is that you can contact them personally, not like direct messaging them, but every organization has some group. Okay, that may be a Google group, that may be a Slack group, that may be a Gitter group, Kind group. Some group is there, always present. You can obviously go out to that group and you can basically ask them, hey, I'm a newcomer here. Can you assign me some issues? Can you tell me about some issues? Can you tell me some things which I can work on? And you can attend their meetings. They some organizations have regular meetings. Like for example, in my organization, we meet every 2 weeks, once every 2 weeks. So you can attend those meetings. You can go and ask them, hey, can I attend these meetings? You can go and attend those meetings. You can start talking to them. So these are some of the things which you can do. And you can obviously start working on the code base directly without contacting them. But I would suggest to contact them, because as I said, we want students who can communicate freely with us, and you need to tell them, you need to show them that you are contributing already. Okay, if you contribute and you don't show to us, then we will never know that you have already contributed. Okay, so we need to know that you have contributed so that it helps in your application.
Okay, we have one last question.
Sure.
And that is how to increase the open source contribution on a daily basis.
Okay, so increasing on a daily basis. So start with small issues and start building up. There is no such thing as like you have to maintain these many contributions in a day. But yeah, it happens. Like and as I said, the open source contribution is not just about code. It's not like you always have to write code. Even you can participate in these meetings. Sometimes in the meetings when new projects are discussed, first they have to discuss how the project is going to be built, the architecture behind it, the system design behind this. You can even give them a system design of your own. You can even voice your opinion. Even those are considered as open source contributions. Okay, not just contributing code on Google Summer of Code. So you can do all of these. So you can even design a logo for an organization that is considered as a contribution to open source world.
Okay, I guess that was the final question.
Cool.
Thank you for being here with us and for sharing about GSoC.
Cool. Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks, JUSC, for having me here. I really had fun speaking to you people, and I'll hope to meet you sometime in the future again. Peace out for now. Bye.
Bye. Thank you,
Yes.
Dada.
Bye.